Hey guys, this is Danny Olson, and I'm on the Nebula Music Podcast.
Oh, and hey, before we begin the interview, I just want to let you know that this is a very special episode. We will be previewing one of Danny Olson's brand new songs at the very end of the episode, right after the interview. So make sure to stay tuned for that. It's a very good song. But for now, let's go ahead and dive right into the conversation. All right, what is up, everybody? Eddie Barco here once again, and welcome to the Nebula Music Podcast. If this is your first time joining me on this show, this is a very cool thing that I do where I talk to some of today's most inspiring and musicians, entrepreneurs, creatives, anyone who's doing something really cool in the music industry. I have them on the show to explore their mindset and really find out what drives their passion. Today, I'm excited because I have somebody who's incredibly talented, who's approaching a genre of music in a very unique way, in a way that I've never heard of before. And it's kind of cool because this person, I'm a little nervous because they are an absolute professional. They're a composer. They know what they're doing, is essentially what I'm trying to say. And I'm excited to get the opportunity to pick their brain. And without rambling too much, I have Mr. Danny Olson joining me today on this episode. Danny, how are you, man?
What's up, Eddie? Dude, it's great to be here. Thanks so much for having me on.
No, thank you for taking time out of your day for being here. To give you guys a little sneak peek of what's been going on today, we've been trying to have this phone call for the past 30, 40 minutes. And as you guys know, sometimes technology just decides to not work for no fucking reason. We do everything we can on our end and, it doesn't work. And me and Danny have been trying to talk to each other for 30 minutes. Skype has not been working. We had to restart shit, but we're finally here, man. We're making it happen.
Yeah, we're here. We're high def. Finally got the Neumann set up. We couldn't do it in AirPods. We have to give the fans the full quality experience, but it was worth it because it sounds great.
Yeah, and I'm sure once we actually get this in post, it'll sound just like honey. It'll be so sweet to the ears.
Yeah.
I love it when it's actually, like that.
It's so funny because I would consider myself an extremely calm person. I mean, maybe my parents or my girlfriend wouldn't exactly say that. But with technology, I get so mad, and I've been like that growing up. Even as a kid, when my dad had his first, work computer at home and I would download games on it or whatever, things wouldn't work. I literally have punched screens before. That's the only avenue in my life that I have a temper. It's so weird. I'm docile and pretty calm and level-headed with so many other things. I've never really been in a fist fight. But with technology, I literally was about to throw my laptop across the room because I couldn't talk to you on Skype. How outrageous is that? I have no patience for technology for some reason.
No, you know what? It's just I'm the same way, dude. When it comes to
it seems so nonsensical. You're everything's working. Why are my permissions off? Why is the OS X thing I just updated to suddenly not letting my microphone work? You know what I mean? It seems like there's no point to it, and then you figure it out and you're like, oh yeah, that was pretty easy.
Yeah. And it's always something so fucking small that, it took forever to find. Yeah. But once you find it, you're like, oh, it was just this button. God damn it.
Right. And I'm a technologist, I guess, if that's even a word. I love, you should see my studio. I always am updating to the newest things and the newest gear and then for me to not be, it's one thing when mom calls me, hey, how do we get Netflix to work? And I'm like, God, how do I even break this down? If you don't understand just how to log it, you know what I mean? But then there's me and I can't get a microphone to work. And I'm like, this shouldn't be happening to somebody like me. You know what I mean? I've been obsessed with technology from a very young age. So when I can't get a microphone to record, it seems like there's something terribly wrong with what I'm doing.
Yeah. Well, actually, since you brought it up, what kind of gear you got in your studio? I'm curious.
So I'm not one of those guys who has racks and racks and racks of analog synths and hardware and all that. I'm not a purist in that form, but I will say that I'll send you a picture when I'm done. Actually, I have a really cool one that I'm editing right now for another educational series that I'm going to be putting out for aspiring producers. But pretty much nice. I got some dangerous outboard gear, a compressor, a master bus compressor for overall master mixing, and a a really nice that's running through right now, a Universal Audio LA 610. Really nice
Nice.
warm qualities for it's a vocal preamp and compressor, and an analog summing mixer, which is I don't know if you know what analog summing is. It's insane. It's a way of mixing music that I literally had never heard of, and all of a sudden it just like creates a whole different level of space in your mixes and everything. And being an orchestral guy, that's very important to me. But I basically have those as analog, and then I'm running, full Mac Pro trash can, wide curved 45-inch, screen, whatever.
Nice.
Yeah, so I'm definitely not one of those dudes who has a million instruments laying around, but I do love good hardware recording
Yeah.
gear.
Yeah, I'm the exact same way when it comes to like plugins and it comes to having a lot of like I'm a drummer, so I have a lot of like drumming gear.
Oh, sweet.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
So
awesome.
that's where I
My
get
dad's a
very.
drummer.
Oh hell yeah, man.
I mean, he's like a garage band drummer, but like he had a band, then they broke up because one guy moved to Phoenix, and like
the
he really
the
wants to
typical
get back
story,
at it.
yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
the typical story of any like garage band. Like one dude like moves away and the band falls apart. I mean that's not his main gig, but yeah, he loves drumming. Dude, I love drummers. Such an appreciation for the rhythmic section.
Oh, dude, I thank you so much. I mean, I feel like we're underappreciated, but we're also very appreciated too in different ways. And
Oh man, it's the metronome of the whole thing. It's the heartbeat.
yeah, it really is. But it's not just about. I saw a picture of this just the other day, and I forgot what the meme said, but regardless of what it said, the whole point of it was that it's not just about keeping the time. A good drummer knows how to make that time feel good. There's a very big difference between just keeping the beat and then like being in the pocket. If any of you guys don't know what that means, in the pocket just basically means that you're kind of making it feel good, that you're grooving with the song that you're playing, and it just
It's
makes you.
that
It locks
yeah,
in. It locks in.
it's that intangible like wow, this feels like really good versus like oh, they're playing well. Like you
Yeah.
can hear somebody that's on time that's just kind of phoning it in, but if they're really, like Eddie said, in the pocket, and that goes for all music. There's
Right.
in the pocket is a phrase that can be just kind of prescribed to, wow, they're really nailing it. You can't really
Exactly.
describe it, you just feel it.
A good example of in the pocket for many people who may not be drummers, but if you want a good example of in the pocket, Questlove. Questlove is a fantastic
Oh man,
example. Yeah. And
so
that's
true.
a guy who can shed like crazy. Like if you look at some of his older videos, he's got some stuff where he's just like, he's throwing fills left and right, he's going fast, but over the years he's kind of honed in on just that like just the sick hip hop R&B grooves for days. And it makes you like when you listen to him playing, you're just kind of bobbing back and forth. That's being in the pocket. It's just making it feel so good that you don't even realize that he's like keeping time and keeping the band together. It just feels so good. That's just a random little tidbit.
Yeah, it's cool because like a lot of that, you listen to the Beatles, you listen to anything like pre the digital age in the recording space, they're not really like digitally locked to a click track, and like
Yeah.
there's timing, but the timing comes from their ability to play as musicians as a whole. You know what I mean? There wasn't,
Yeah.
and like nowadays you go in and like you have your headphones when you're recording, and like everything is very rudimentary. And I feel like I talk to a lot of artists that like specifically when they're programming drums, if they're not like recording the drums, they specifically don't like put the snares exactly on the 2 and the 4, because
Yeah.
it's very easy in a DAW to just snap it to the 2 and the 4. It's too clean for a lot of people. And
Yeah.
guys like Questlove, I don't know if he records to a click track or not, but a lot of the sort of like free flow recording with real musicians gives you that sense of like, wow, they're creating something like really amazing versus, oh, this pop track sounds very stale and it doesn't really inspire me, mostly because of the fact that it's just recorded rudimentary, esque onto a grid, and everything's kind of like where it's quote supposed to be. But a lot of the people like Questlove or who else does this? I think Jay-Z does this with his beats, Dr. Dre for sure, where they like leave room for air and it gives it this organic sense of realness. And that's
Yeah.
that's that X factor that a lot of people can't recreate, even though they're brilliant musicians.
Yeah.
There's that like difference of how something sounds.
Well, I believe it's kind of making a resurgence, at least before the lockdown hit. The whole drumming, to kind of give you, Danny, like a little bit of an insight, and other people too, if they're interested. Drumming for a little while was starting to, I'm not going to say die because it's never really going to die, but in terms of using drummers in the studio was something that was starting to be used less and less. And the reason for that is because programmed drums and samples have just become so good that in a budget sense, it just makes more sense just to like program drums, right? But I would say like maybe
1000%, yeah.
exactly. But I would say like maybe since 2018 and 19, there was this little bit of a boom for drummers again because people started getting tired. What you were just saying, people started getting a little bored with how very straightforward drums were, in songs. So drummers started being brought in to like imitate more programmed drums, but still have that little human touch, I guess you can say, that's slightly delayed by a couple fractions of milliseconds that give you that little bounce. But I don't know why what you were talking about reminded me of randomly talking about Questlove here, but that song by The Roots, what's that song that everybody knows? You Got Me. That song by The Roots.
Yeah.
So many people think that song is a drum machine because the whole entire drum groove, the whole entire song, it's pretty straightforward and simple. Then towards the end, Questlove just switches to like a little drum and bass beat kind of thing, like a something like that. And he did all of that, with a click. He sat there in the studio and played that. So when you hear it now with that context, it's kind of amazing at how someone like Questlove can sit there and play everything so straightforward and so precise. And then at the very end, kind of switch it on you and be like, nope, I'm a human being, dude. I'm doing this precisely, but I'm going to throw in some little things here that's going to remind you that I'm here alive as a human playing it. It's kind of fucking crazy when you think about it, but
yeah. And something just to interject there, something that I just remembered was that Questlove co-produced Hamilton with
he did. You're right.
He did. Right? I was watching a documentary with Miranda, right? And I was watching a documentary or like an episode of a documentary on how they made one of the songs, and he was talking about working with Questlove, and I like totally forgot after watching it multiple times and being like, there is so much hip hop, jazz, soul crossover in this. It transcends what so many musicals have done. And then I'm like, oh, duh. Like Questlove was working on it. Like, and if you listen to the songs, they are so breakbeat and they're so, I want to say all over the place, but they also all feel right, and that's, I think, why that musical was so tangible. He was taking something from left field, not left field, I guess, but he was taking something so historical and he was pairing it with something, hip hop and soul and jazz. Something like Questlove, you would never expect to like compose for a musical or co-produce for a musical, and then remembering why those songs are so good. They're so raw, I don't know if you're familiar. I was obsessed with it.
I haven't seen it, but I've heard some of the songs. I've heard some of the songs, but I haven't seen it yet. I want to.
It's so cool. The songwriting is just on point, and then the the drums. I mean, I think it's on one of the streaming things that you can watch. You should definitely watch it. It's really, really good.
Going to. Was that
you hear his influences all over the place?
Was that is the episode that you're talking about? Was that from Song Exploder on Netflix? Is that the one you're talking about?
Song Exploder. That's it.
Yeah. I saw that one too.
It.
Yeah. Such a great episode. That was
when they really is.
And they barely touched the surface. Like I could tell that there's so much more nuances.
They only did that one song. Yeah, they just described the writing process. And he like talks about, because everybody thinks like he did everything and then he starred in it, but he actually was just sort of the songwriter. Then he had a musical partner, a musical director that would like help him flesh out all these ideas. And then there was like Questlove on the whole other side. It's like, how do we build this entire narrative, through the lens of hip hop, jazz, soul? You know what I mean? Like just such an insane collaboration. It goes so much further than like, oh, they just wrote a musical. You know what I mean? And I'm a big musical guy anyways. I started like acting when I was younger, so I have a deeper appreciation for that. Yeah.
What's your favorite musical other than Hamilton, obviously?
Oh man, that's tough because I love Rent because it has the same sort of like, it's like a neoclassical but like rock, but the songs are so beautiful. I'm much more of a musical type driven person in that like I think about the music before I think about the lyrics and the content of the story. So I'm first drawn to melodic ideas and harmony and how that evolves. And maybe I can explain the difference between harmony and melody in a second. But just basically what you hear before, like that's the first thing I pay attention to. Does the music move me before like the lyrics, the singing, and the and the story. So with that being said, I mean, I love Rent, but I think my all-time favorite has to be Phantom of the Opera, just because
Ooh.
of the massive, like, overarching musical context. The Andrew Lloyd Webber, famous composer, employed in that story. And I was late to
Yeah.
the game. I mean, I know it was big in the 90s. I literally just saw it this past year with my girlfriend when it was touring in Chicago.
Oh,
I just
nice.
and I saw the movie, prior, because it got made into the movie in the 2000s, I think. But
No, you have to
yeah,
watch it live.
I'm
It's
a
a different
yeah,
experience live, man.
it totally is. I'm just a big fan of epics. Like I love big epic stories.
Yeah.
That's what I'm really drawn to.
Yeah, you know what? That makes sense because that's a good way to segue into kind of some of the stuff that you do. Because to give
Hmm.
you guys more information, and I'm hoping that you can enlighten me a little bit more and give me more details on what you do. But you're a composer, which is something that I find very, very fascinating. I myself, I'm not a composer. I can arrange, I can read music, and I understand theory, but not to the
Mm.
level where I would ever consider myself a composer because there's just so much information that you need to do that. And there is something very interesting and intricate about being able to take, harmony as a knowledge and be able to replicate themes and create emotion out of it, but still understanding all the rules that go into creating this stuff. So one of the things I'm hoping that you can help me understand a little bit is how you got started. I guess that's a good place to start because you are a brilliant composer. Like you understand harmony and melody and all of that in a
You
much
give
more
me
intricate
way
way.
too much credit. Way too
Well,
much credit.
I give
I
credit where credit
appreciate
is
it
due,
though.
man. So honestly, I think I give you enough credit. That's probably the
Okay,
right
we'll
amount.
settle on you give me the perfect amount of credit. That sounds
There
good.
you go. There you
No.
go.
So I started when I was 7 doing musicals. And I can't even. It was Grease was my first one, and I was Sonny or one of the guys in the. I wasn't the lead. I was 7, so I don't even know how you judge who's good enough to be the lead at that age. But I wasn't the lead. It was my first one. I don't even remember why, because at that point, my dad is an amazing hockey player, and he played for Team USA, and like I was playing hockey as
Wow.
a young kid up until that point. So maybe at a certain point, like my dad's musical in that he likes the drums and he's rhythmic. He can't really read music, but he just has that like groove. But no one
Right.
really else in my family. I guess my grandparents, my grandma on my dad's side loved opera. So there was that singing aspect. She liked to sing in church, but there was no other like composer or serious musician in the family that was like pushing me into the arts. Maybe it was one of those like, hey, do you want to try this? And I really liked it. I mean, I was 7, so it was hard. Like I wasn't a prodigy by any means. I wasn't like, oh my God, I found my calling at age 7. But I loved it enough to keep doing it. So I kept doing musicals, kept doing shows, throughout community theater. And then in middle school, I was in I picked up the trumpet in 5th grade. That was one of those like everybody's playing an instrument. All my closest friends were like, "We're gonna play the trumpet. It's cool. Girls play the flute." And like I was like, "Cool, I'll play the trumpet." And then a
That's
year
cool.
after that, everybody dropped out, and I still loved it. And that kind of defined me doing musicals, being in musical theater, singing, and playing the trumpet. Those were kind of my like things. And I never really stopped to ask myself like, I'm good at these and I'm building my life around them, but like, do I love them? Is
Hmm.
this just who I am because of how life has sort of evolved, or is this who I am because this is who I want to be? And that was sort of answered in college because I was in marching band. I went to Indiana University for acting. Um,
Ooh.
I will say that another thing that I did was I DJ'd from middle school onwards.
What?
I
That's crazy.
loved, yeah,
That's
yeah. I
cool.
forgot. I always forget about that part. I was at a friend's sister's graduation party I was in 7th grade, and it was just literally in a backyard. And it was one of those radio station DJs that like came to DJ. There must have been 20 people there, but he set up a tent. He had fog going. He had lasers. He had speakers. He was playing all the music from the radio. I was enamored. So that was when my
That's
quest for
awesome.
electronic music and like that's how I tied in performing because I just loved playing music for people, making them dance. I don't know. I don't know what it was, but I was already an actor on stage, so I knew I loved the performance aspect. But here's this whole different way of, you know, buying equipment and researching music and playing at shows and playing for. I was obsessed. So as you can tell, the entire lineage of me as a kid, it's all about performing. It's all about being on stage. It's all about being in control. It's all, you know, whatever it is. And I guess in college, when I got there, I had yet to be creative in terms of creating music, writing music. Like I played the trumpet. I was the lead in all the musicals. Like I said, went to Indiana, was going to be in the marching band as a trumpet player, but I was also going to be in the acting program. But my God, midway through my freshman year, my grades weren't that great. I hadn't been to a lot of the classes for acting. I was just like, why am I not? I'm just like going through the motions. You know what I mean? And I reckon this was a massive turning point for me because like I sort of realized, holy shit, if I just keep doing this, yeah, I love acting. But do I love it because I'm good at it? Or is it my passion? Like, do I really want to make a career out of this? Do I really want to be a professional trumpet player? I could, but that's only because I've spent so many hours over so many years becoming that good. And
Yeah.
credit given to my parents because a lot of it was not ever like forcing me to do it, but like giving me a support system and a basis for, you know, the arts. And like I said, like my dad could have very easily been like, you're a talented hockey player. You're going to be a hockey player. I'm pushing you to do what I didn't ever do. He didn't go to the pros because he got hurt. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? So he could have very easily been, you know, what a lot of people, you know, do to their kids and
Yeah.
push them
Living
through a vicarious
vicariously.
nature.
Yeah.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
credit due to them, they always supported me for doing something that they never really. I I don't want to say they didn't understand it. They probably understood it, but like it wasn't a path that they understood in terms of having done it themselves.
Right.
So,
Shout out to mom and
um,
dad for being good
shout out to mom
parents.
and dad, which they will definitely hear this. I know they're, you know, they're this morning. I'm like, yeah, I'm going to do this podcast. And they're like, cool. Can we listen to it? I'm like, well, yeah, when it's done. Yeah, but where's the link? Oh God. Like, all right, let's
I'll send them a private link. You'll have a
send them a private link. They don't get that all these are done and then they're cleaned up and then there's, you know,
yeah.
but maybe most people don't get that. You know, I talked about this to my friends all the time. I talk to, you know, I just almost preach like do the self work, be honest with yourself, find your passion. Everybody's capable of it. I just look at myself as found something that I really wanted to invest my time in, and I did just that. I'm
Mm.
not a prodigy. I'm not any better than anyone else who has the potential. Everybody has that potential, but what separates the people who have success in a certain field and people who don't is the ones who just do and the ones who don't do. That's it. It's very binary to me. And obviously that's, you know, easier said than done. There's a lot of things, you know, you need to provide for a family, whatever your goals are, like that factors into play. I understand that. It's not as easy as being like, oh, just be passionate about something. Because I have
Right.
conversations with people all the time that struggle with this. They struggle with personal identity. They don't want to work at the job they're working at, but they recognize that they need an income, obviously, especially in a city like Los Angeles, New York, or Chicago, where you can't just take a break and, you know, spend 2 years discovering what, you know what I mean? Like it's not
Yeah.
that easy. But I guess my turning point, I just feel very fortunate that I was in college and this sort of happened over my freshman year where, like I said, I I was barely passing my intro acting thing. I think I had like a C minus and I sat down with the instructor and he was just like, you know, you're clearly very talented. You have a lot of experience, but like, what do you want to be doing? You know, like what? And I just had this sense of like, I don't ever want to feel like I'm half-assing something again because my integrity is, you know, it means a lot to me. Just the same
Yeah.
as like this podcast, the audio quality. Yeah, I could record with AirPods, but I want to make sure it sounds great so you have something that sounds good for your product. You know,
Right.
standing behind, you know, my actions became really important at that point. And of course, like anybody else, I look back and like, yeah, I made a lot of mistakes. Yeah, I dicked around. Yeah, I probably, you know, partied too much at times and didn't follow through with certain, but like that's the learning experience of
Of
going to
course.
college, and like to being on your own. But the one thing professionally that really switched at that moment for me was like, I can't be in acting anymore. I can't be out of state spending over $30,000 a year, of which I was going to have to pay back in full, by the way. I mean, I got scholarships, but my parents were not paying for me and my two other brothers to go to out of state schools. And we all
Yeah.
did.
Oh,
So
wow.
there's no way my dad's going to be $500,000 in debt just from three guys in undergrad. So
Yeah. And you're from
I knew that it
Chicago,
was kind
right?
of
Like
on me.
you were
I'm from
born and raised in
Chicago. Yeah.
Chicago. Yeah. Gotcha.
Suburbs of Chicago. Yeah. Yeah. So 20, 30 minutes away from actual Chicago.
Gotcha.
Um, but IU was obviously in Indiana, 4 hours away. Um, and it was expensive. His whole thing was be there if you want, but don't just, once you hit the real world, you're going to owe this money back. So if you don't want to be there for a really good reason, don't just be there to party.
Mm.
And obviously, when you're in it, you're like, oh, you don't know what you're talking about. But like when you get out, you're like, holy shit,
Shit. Yeah.
student debt. So I needed to make it worth it. I needed to be doing something there that I could look back and be like, I could not have been the person I was without those 4 years. So it
Mm.
wasn't like that mindset was a catalyst to me finding my passion. It kind of all happened at the same time. It happened very seamlessly. I can tell you exactly what it was that changed it for me. And it was Hans Zimmer's soundtrack to the Pirates of the Caribbean.
Ooh,
I don't
wait,
know
the original movie or which one?
the first one, The Curse of
Wow.
the Black Pearl, that came out probably in like 2006 or like whenever I
Yeah.
was a freshman in college
Great
or right
fucking
before that.
soundtrack. Great
Amazing
soundtrack.
soundtrack. A little funny anecdote is that he actually didn't score that. Somebody in his camp did, and he sort of took credit for it, and he maybe wrote a theme. That doesn't really matter. But I was just like, whatever he's doing here, I loved the epic story. I love the music behind it. I don't know where I was clearly in my dorm room watching this movie. I know it was by myself. It was a pivotal moment of like, holy shit, I got to be a film composer. I have to write stuff like this. And
Yeah.
I didn't know if I had it inside me, but that was the first time that I was like, I'm going to be creative in the sense that I will learn how to do this and I will be the best at it.
Damn.
And I had all this musical knowledge in past, but it was just musical knowledge in the form of I can read music, I can sing, I can dance, I can play the trumpet, I can be in marching band, you know what I mean? It was all like
Yeah.
these various aspects, but none of it was like, can you sit down and write a movie score?
Yeah. Composing is
So
a different ball game, man.
it's a
Completely
totally
different.
different ball game. Yeah. And I was fortunate enough to be at a school that, I mean, IU is massive and they have an amazing music program. Probably they do have the number one music school that isn't a conservatory. So like outside of Juilliard, outside of Eastman, the conservatory music schools, Indiana's music school is the best for a public school. So I was in a
Really?
good position, but their
Wow.
composition program, I couldn't just audition for it. Their composition program was extremely avant-garde in the sense that they were looking to take on composers that were trying new things. And
Hmm.
through my research, I'm like, well, I want to be writing film scores. And a lot of that was taking music from certain eras, like the Romantic period of the 1800s, when German composers like Strauss, Wagner, after Beethoven, they were really like bridging this romantic period um, of composition. I knew I loved that, but that wasn't to them. That wasn't like worthy enough to be in the composition program. In
Hmm.
fact, and I'm not going to name anybody, I got quite a lot of resistance from the professors in the program because it is such an elitist program. I'd never composed anything before. I'd never, sat down and like written, at the piano or anything like that. Like I could kind of play the piano, but I knew where I wanted to be, but I was having trouble sort of like connecting the dots on how to get there. And I was in a fraternity. So I like wasn't in the right, and I was in the marching band. So I had so much going on. I was like, I don't know how to just be a composition student. And then I found something called the individualized major program through the School of Arts and Sciences at IU. And certain bigger schools have them. It essentially is a program where like if you can cherry pick, and I don't want to say cherry pick like you're cheating, but if you can like pull different accreditations and educational outlets and pathways from different areas of the school of Indiana, you can sort of make your own program. And granted, you have to like defend it. You have to actually
Yeah.
like
You
go
have to get it approved and
you
stuff,
can get
right?
it approved, and then you have mentors, you have advisors, and you have like faculty people on your team throughout the entire process that like pretty much are like, are you on path to be able to call this something when you graduate? So it's not just
Yeah.
you can just like do whatever you want. But basically what I did was I built in the entire composition program. So it's like I'm taking every single class with every single composition student, but I'm not technically a music school composer.
Interesting.
So I'm doing all that. So I'm getting the exact same education. I had straight A's in basically all of it. But on top of that, I have independent study with grad students that loved film music that were like getting their PhDs, that they kind of guided my process. I had music business. I had telecommunications. So like writing for media, understanding film, understanding. I took all these other classes because I knew I don't want to just be a guy that sits down at the piano and writes on a grand staff with a pencil. Like I can do that, but I knew I wanted to pivot this into film music, into moving to Los Angeles, into writing these big scores. And this was my way to do it, without having to drop out and like, go to USC or something.
Right.
So
Which is a huge
I was,
composing school, dude. It's
it is.
insane.
And they had
Yeah.
one there that I was almost going to apply to the 1 or 2 year grad program that was super selective, but I just decided that, I had enough on my plate, and I like was confident of my abilities at that point.
Right.
So this composition program really like, or the thing that I created, what was the name of it? Composition and sound design with an emphasis in film and new media, I think
You
was the
named that?
official
Is that
was
what you
the
named it?
official that was what I named it. That was the official scholarly title.
Wow.
And I was kind of on my own track, and if I didn't want to go to class, I was only hurting myself. It instilled in me this insane accidentally. It was this accidental, insane amount of personal responsibility and accountability that I'd never felt before. And it
Yeah.
was like, yeah, you don't have to go to this, but you created this program. It took me 6 months in the beginning of my sophomore year. And then I think I started it the beginning of my junior year. So it was a full year of junior year, full senior year, and then I had to go a fifth year plus summer school in between to like make up all the other stuff. And I had
God
prerequisites,
damn.
that I
Holy
still had to do.
shit.
But yeah, so I went 5 years, but it was like I was working my ass off. I was in school all the time. I had composition recitals that I had to attend to. I had composition recitals that I had to perform in once a semester. So I had to be writing pieces all the time. I was the vice president of a fraternity. I was in marching band. I mean, it was insane. But I feel like I got so much out of that experience that it really prepared me for not only like knowing what I wanted to do and developing this passion, but like being accountable for myself and like learning that like I could be an artist, but I was always going to be the artist that was also his own manager, that was like a businessman that like understood how to navigate the waters because I had a lot of the experience in college. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? And like I like, for better or for worse, just did so much in so many different aspects. I wasn't just, applying to one program that was already available and then I did it and then I graduated and then I went on to do a job that was expected of me. There's nothing wrong with that. I just didn't do that. So it created this massive amount of ambition for myself and a bar that I set super high because I knew what I was capable of.
Yeah.
And like immediately, right when I got into it, I I knew I wanted to move to LA. I knew I wanted to intern my penultimate year before I graduated, the summer before my last year. And I did. I interned in LA for 2 months during the summer. And yeah, I kind of just like amongst a sea of peers who was about to graduate and like wasn't sure what they wanted to do, I was like so steadfast in that. It was pretty cool. I mean, I don't even know where it happened or when it happened, but sort of this sense of responsibility and the sense of like, this is what I'm doing and no one can stop me. I developed it then, and I still have it now.
Yeah. And I'm wondering when it comes to, there's so much to unpack there, dude. And I
Yeah,
love
I
your
know.
story so far.
Sorry.
No, dude, never apologize, because that's what we're here for. We're here to explore your story. And it's crazy because I don't get the opportunity to talk to a lot of composers, or at least to pick their brain enough. And composing is one of those things that has always fascinated me, because I know we've been saying this throughout this conversation, but it is something that I want to make clear, that the difference between composing and just basically playing music, or even just producing music, there is this, how would you say, there's this level of knowledge that you need to be a composer, it's very difficult to be a composer without having that level of knowledge. You can be a fantastic pianist, but if you don't know how harmony works and how all these rules play together, it's almost impossible. I'm not going to say it's impossible, but it can be very, very difficult. Let me ask you this, because I've listened to some of the stuff that you've made, some of your own like remixes and music that you've made, and it's crazy how you've combined orchestration and composing with more of a electronic pop kind of approach, if that makes sense. And so
Yeah.
what I'm wondering, because there's so many questions I could ask you, man, and I really want to do my best to explore some of the things that I'm very curious about, is how did you find, that might be too broad to say that way, but I guess I would say it isn't, most composers that I've worked with or that I've met, either through music school or whatever, it isn't the first thought to bridge pop and composing, because it's so fucking difficult to compose that you want to compose for film. Like, you want to do all the intricate shit. So it isn't like very common for a composer to just, hey, I'm going to make some pop music. Like, it's just not a thing that I am aware of quite a bit, but you did that. And so I'm wondering, what was it that got you to combine those two? Because it's a brilliant combination, but I'm wondering how that happened.
That's a great question. So basically, I had these two worlds. I loved, lush movie scores.
Pirates of the Caribbean, man. That's
Pirates
the
of the
one.
Caribbean, anything by Hans Zimmer, anything by John Williams. I'm just like, this is unreal. But I don't only want to be a film composer. There's another side that I've been DJing forever. I love the performance aspect of, being up in front of a group of people. And then because of that, and because of the years of DJing, I have such a love for like hip hop, EDM. I mean, you can say EDM, but like I was downloading pirated, electronic music in the
LimeWire
90s.
days,
I
man.
might not before that, but in the days of, do you remember like you go on like forums in Russian in a different country? You just you'd click on a Zippy share link, not knowing what you were going to infect your computer with, but it said like so and so mix, and you knew that it was a DJ, like a big DJ in Eastern Europe. And that's what I was doing in the 90s, and I was making little mixes. And so I had this whole other side of me that's like, I love performing, and because of that performance of being an electronic a DJ, I loved the electronic music. So there was always these two push and pulls. I don't want to say there was a light and a dark, because a lot of people try to give me advice, especially as my career was progressing. You can't do both. You got to pick one. You got to go for it. You got to be a film composer, and you can be in that world, or you can be a DJ and a producer, and you can be in that world. And I'm like, well, why? They're like, well, it's too hard to do both. I'm like, says who? Just because like that's a business decision, like why? And I'll be honest, I'm still paving that pathway. About 2 or 3 years ago, I figured out like, and I have a lot of success in sync because of being a film composer, and I have another artist that I have released music under with another producer called the Hidden Citizens, and it's just sync music for licensing. So it was either like do that and then segue that into scoring films full time, or be a DJ and play nightclubs and release like, club bangers. I'm like, but why can't there be both? And the only reason was because no one's done it. And I mean, I don't want to be cliche, but that's what any innovator kind of went up against. The resistance of, well, it's too hard because these worlds are too different. And I'm not saying I'm innovative. There's plenty of artists that are already doing orchestral stuff. There's plenty of DJs that are classically trained that play their instruments on stage. I'm not really reinventing the wheel. I think I just realized, why can't I because all film music is your ability to tell a story through music.
Right.
That's all. That's
That's a
all it
great
is. And
explanation.
that's all it is. You mentioned, oh, you have to have all this information. You have to have all this knowledge. That stuff helps. But I will have you know, my favorite anecdotal example is Hans Zimmer, who's probably my number one, most aspired to be like, or my number one inspiration. He has not a shred of classical training or education. He
Really?
was the keyboardist in the Buggles, who released Video Killed a Radio Star. It was the first music video. Then he went on to score films in the late 80s, early 90s, and just like figured it out. I'm not
Yeah.
kidding. And he's the one of the biggest film composers of all time,
Well, you know
next to
who
John
else is kind of
Williams.
like that? And not to interrupt you, but
No,
you know
it's
who?
fine.
I think Phil Collins is like that too. Like Phil
Exactly.
Collins,
Right.
he is a brilliant drummer, brilliant musician. But when he started composing, I think now he might. I think now he knows more. He has more knowledge. But I think at the
Sure.
time when he first
It's
started
not a
composing,
prerequisite. It's not a,
exactly.
you have to have a degree from Juilliard or a degree from Oxford. That's John Williams. He has the Oxford and the Juilliard and be like the genius composer. Good, amazing. But in this day and age with technology, you can figure out how to do it. And on top of that, that's from a technical side, but from a storytelling side, if you're an emotional human being and you understand, like when you look at a film and you're like, how do I communicate what the overall thematic messages are of this through
Hmm.
music?
Well, actually,
And
let me ask you that real quick, if you don't mind me intersecting a little bit.
sure.
How do you specifically? Because again, this is a brilliant opportunity for me that you being a composer. I know that a lot of people when they describe how they compose for films or commercials or whatever, they talk a lot about emotion. They talk about a lot, what's going on in the scene. I gotta create something that emulates what's happening in the scene. Well, that's something that I've always been fascinated by. Like, how is it that, let's say in Pirates of the Caribbean or any other movie, how is it that someone like you can look at this visual and then create a musical theme that represents that emotion? Is there some sort of, I imagine there's no formula. I imagine it's a lot of, has to do with instinct,
Yeah.
but I'm wondering.
Short answer, no one knows. I have no idea. And you can interview the best in the business, and they'll say, Hans Zimmer is famous for saying right before he starts, he goes, I have no idea how to score your film. You don't go into it thinking this is what I'm going to do. You have things that you're good at. Like I have ways of making music that I'm good at, that I'm comfortable with, because that's just my style. A
Yeah.
way that you write, maybe you like a certain key, maybe you like to start with a certain instrument. Who knows? Everybody's different, and that's what makes especially film score so cool, and creativity for that matter. But there's no formula. The only thing, and this is kind of a segue with like how I've bridged these worlds, or how I'm trying to. People respond to emotion. Human
Right.
beings, especially ones that consume art, consume music, that like paintings, that like poetry, that like whatever, I don't know, journalism, that like read it. People respond to art, to your vision of how an emotion is portrayed, that connects deeply in someone, and no one knows why. That's the lifelong question. Why do we cry when we see something or read something or hear something sad or moving? What are a combination of notes? What does it do, psychologically to your brain, or reading certain things how does that all work? So a creative's job or a composer's job is to, tap into, I guess, through the lens of film scoring, what is the director saying? What is the story he's telling? How do I write music that unlocks that or enhances that?
Yeah.
And on the other side of that, you look at like a genre like horror. How do I create silence to build anticipation and fear? It can
Right.
work in the opposite way. So everything to do with being a good, like I guess, film composer, or a good, composer for another medium, is how do I enhance the vision that's already here? How do I take the emotion and tell a story in a long form way? And kind of finishing up my earlier thought, that's what I'm bringing, or I'm trying to bring, to the electronic music space. I've felt too often now that there's a disconnect between real, I don't want to say like pure innovation, but everybody's doing what everybody else has done,
Yeah.
for the most part. when I see releases from some of my favorite artists, I think, or let's just say when I see releases from artists that are like at the top, that are like, no matter what they do, it's going to hit millions of streams. A lot of it just feels old. It feels recycled. It feels,
Yeah.
well, we know how to capitalize on trends, on marketing platforms, on the fact that we have a label involved. We don't need to be that innovative because what we care about is mass consumption. We care about streams. We're in the digital age of likes, streams, followers. That's all currency. And it's sort of like, it is what it is in a lot of ways, but like my whole thing is all that is short term. Like you write a song about one thing and it's just one thing, especially in the dance music space. Like so much of it has just been done before and it's just, there's no innovation. Like why can't a song be 5 minutes? Why does it have to be 3.5 minutes radio ready? And we talked earlier about like a polished stale track. God, it's so easy to tell. And I'm not saying that I record everything live. I don't, but I use, aspects of realism through strings, through brass, through choir, through vocal melodies that I write to try to tell a longer story in a more emotional way so that it connects with people versus just being like, oh, that guy released like a banger that I would love to hear at a party on Spotify. Cool. I'm never going to remember it again. I don't want to do that just for the added value of being famous and or like expediting the pathway to becoming a successful artist. I think for me, it's taken a lot longer, and I'm 32 and I'm very confident in like that I'm hitting my stride, but like I'm trying to bridge this world of, I don't want to say film music, but like composing, adding elements of the songwriting process that are more emotional and that touch on more emotional things than just writing about things that everybody's already written about. Writing about a breakup in the way that a million artists before me have written about a breakup. There's something to be said about universality and like things that everybody feels: grief, loss, loneliness, depression. Those are all incredible things to write about, but you got to do it through your own lens. So it makes people feel the way that you feel when you create it. And I think I'm not special in my human experiences. I haven't experienced more or less than anybody else. I don't think I'm brilliant or gifted in that way, but like, I just try to create that emotional context through the vehicle of, being a composer and writing in more of a way that pays attention to, emotions being at the forefront. And I try to link up with, there's so many artists that I'm so lucky to be working with that have that exact same outlook. Like, let's just not write something that we know works that will be like a hit. Let's try to do something that like really gives people an outlet for the things they're going through. And I can't even tell you the messages I've received from people that are like, I was thinking about suicide this year and like some of your music has like made me turn the corner. I mean, that's exactly why I do it. I don't care if I become world famous or if I'm playing sold out arenas. I mean, yeah, that would be incredible because I want the most people as possible to be affected by my music, but that gives me the validation and the courage to keep pushing. Purpose. Yes, purpose. Exactly, because that's why I do it. And I know that I'm not more talented or better than any other artist. I think I've figured out what I'm good at and how I can bring that, that way of writing to this genre, to this industry, to this space that hasn't really had a lot of it. Like I said, the reason why I had so much resistance before and people were like, oh, this is film music is over here. And then being a pop star is over here. And I'm like, well, why can't they work together? Why can't we change the perception of what should be? Because who doesn't want to experience something that moves them emotionally? Why does a pop song have to be just something that feels tired and overdone? And like, why can't pop, which stands for popular, by the way, why can't that start to mean, and I'm not saying that all pop music is completely void of emotion. I'm obviously just generalizing here.
Right.
We as composers and producers in that world, we just live by especially in the age of Spotify, in the age of mass consumption, the age of TikTok, the age of immediate gratification, we live within constraints when we're creating. It has to be this
Yeah.
length. It has to fit on this sort of playlist. It has to,
Which can be
and
so
it's
limiting,
hard.
man. It's so
It's
limiting.
very limiting. It's very frustrating because you see people that, sign major record deals that are just TikTok stars that don't have any musical experience, and they're going to get famous because they have eyes on them.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, should I just sacrifice all this, the passion for what I'm creating because, I see the ability to sort of fast track myself? And for me, the answer is no. But a lot of people say, play the game until you can change the game.
Exactly.
I don't prescribe to that because I would be fearful of losing who I am and what I'm good at. So that's my long-winded answer.
No, I love that. And I appreciate that. Here's one of the things that I'm curious about, because I think what you're saying is incredibly true. I think that a lot of innovators have had a similar thought at some point in their career. Here's where I hear some, again, I'm kind of lucky that I get the opportunity to explore so many different mindsets. And I'm in this interesting position where I get to kind of spectate, and I get to spectate everybody from all different sides of the table, people who love the traditional stuff, people who are innovators, people who are cool just, buying songs and just doing whatever's trendy. It's interesting to really understand everyone's perspective. And I love your perspective. One of the things that I've heard, and I think that's what makes change. And I think innovators like you have that similar mindset. One thing that I began to understand from a lot of other people is this, I don't want to say fear, but I do feel like there is this knowledge that there are a lot of artists who want to innovate, who, they have this itch to do something different, because as a creative, you want to naturally. But there is this fear of maybe doing it too soon, if that makes sense. Because there's so many examples in history where, in just music alone, where you'll hear a song or a project that comes out and it just goes nowhere. But then 10 years later, people look at it and they're like, wow, they were way ahead of their time. They're brilliant, and that artist is no longer around, or, whatever. That artist has moved on.
I feel like that's literally Picasso. It might not, right? Like, I think all of his paintings got famous super posthumously, like maybe decades after he passed away. And that's a good example. And I mean,
he was kind of successful towards the end of his life. Like he became successful.
It might not be Picasso. I can't remember, but like that, it's a total perfect parallel, because you worry about that. You're like, well, what should I be doing? But if you think about should, you're looking at this from a business angle, and then all of a sudden you're like, you're not really being innovative to be innovative. You're like, you're following a business pathway for success, which kind of contradicts being like just creatively unbridled. You know what I mean? Like they're kind of oxymorons. So I think as an artist, especially in 2020, in this day and age, that's something that you always grapple with. Do I produce like a TikTok star? Do I produce a song that's gonna go viral? That's a big thing. Right. Or do I say that doesn't excite me? I want to just do my own thing, and like I'm just gonna have to live with the fact that maybe I don't find success the way that a lot of other artists will.
That's the hard one. It's hard.
It's all about choices. You know what I mean? Like a big thing for me is, I'm 32. I've been in LA almost 10 years. Am I in a rush? No. Do I love where I'm at? For sure. Do I constantly have to keep my ego in check because I get frustrated that I read about people that are signing record deals without any experience in the industry just because they have Instagram following? Yeah, it kind of pisses me off. But then I'm like, well, who cares? That's not me, and that isn't my journey. So I shouldn't worry about it. All I should do is be happy for them and hope that that's the career path and trajectory that they really want for themselves. Just living through the positive lens of that and not getting jaded by the fact that, and it is an uphill battle. I live in it every day. Do I make these concessions? But, guys like you that are sitting here being like, I can see what you're trying to accomplish. I can see the innovation from, if it's resonating with people, and I'm getting asked to speak about it on a podcast, like I'm eternally grateful for that. And that to me is a signifier that at least I'm on the right track and I'm making some right decisions.
You absolutely are. And I think that's something that needs to be commended, because I think that, and I really like what you just said, because it is a struggle that every artist has, and I'm not the first to say it. In fact, I feel like at this point it's just a cliche. Everyone knows that when you're an
Yeah.
artist and a creative, you have to deal with that doubt. It comes with the territory.
Yeah, it
And
comes with the vulnerability of creating. When you put yourself
exactly.
out there, you're always going to battle that, like, not only is this good enough, but like, am I doing the right thing? Does this
Can I
even who the fuck cares? Does this even matter? You know what I
Yeah,
mean?
can I ask you something? And
Sure.
this might be kind of personal, but I'm just wondering,
Please.
does it ever get exhausting? Do you ever just feel like, God damn it, like I've and by the way, and you've experienced some success, so maybe it doesn't apply to you, but I always keep my ear to the ground, and I'm very lucky to be aware of a lot of, up and comers and people who are in the game grinding, trying to like
Sure.
do their thing. And no one has ever outrightly said it, like no one has ever said it, but I can be very perceptive and I can feel when someone is just like, fuck this shit. You know what I mean? And so I'm wondering
Yeah.
for you, does that ever cross your mind? Like, do you ever just like ever experience like a day or even a week where you're just like, God damn it, why am I even doing any of this stuff? Like, I know I have this desire to do something different, but it can be tiring. So I'm wondering if do you ever feel that? Do you ever come across that feeling?
Never. And
Nice.
not never in the sense that I don't get exhausted, but it's never crossed my mind that this isn't worth it or this is not what I should be doing.
Mm.
The only thing that I've thought is, and I think this is normal of anybody that has high ambitions, do I need to reframe my goals or do I need to reframe what I see in the future?
Ooh,
Like a big
interesting.
example to get personal, like I do want a family. I don't want to be a chain smoker. You know what I mean? Because I care about my health, B, because I care about, you know, um, wanting to have a sustainable relationship. And I have an amazing girlfriend. We've been together a year and a half. She's in Reiki and healing, and she's also doing her own thing. So she gets building something from the ground up and doing something, she has her own business. She understands that. But I don't want to. If I was 25, then yeah, I would be like, oh, I want to do, a world tour and I want to like just fucking go for it, And I'm not saying that I don't want to go for it, but like that semblance of how my career and my profession has sort of evolved in the goals and what I want out of it have sort of just shifted. It doesn't mean I don't want to perform. It doesn't mean that I don't want to tour. It doesn't mean that God, my goal is like being on stage, conducting my music with the full orchestra, with the choir, but also have electronic music, also have a movie playing behind. Like I have very lofty goals for that. But another part of it is having a family. So that's a good example of how like I never said I'm completely done. It's not binary for me. I wouldn't be like, oh, if I didn't tour by this age, like clearly music isn't for me. There's no plan
Mm.
B. It's just what's maybe, a prime or a subprime or whatever. Like it might not be exactly what I wanted when I was 21, 22, but like never ever was it, this isn't what you should be doing. You should like, go work at Enterprise, rent a car. And there's nothing wrong with that. But I just know, and I've always been steadfast in that, like, this is exactly what I have to be doing, or some semblance of this is what I have to be doing. This brings me the most joy in the world. So why would I ever not want to have that? Creating music, being able to write music that makes me incredibly happy and excited, and hopefully other people incredibly happy and excited. That's my purpose. So
Yeah.
it's never had this isn't what I meant to be doing. It's only been, do I need to reframe things a little bit because other things are important to me as well.
Yeah, and I think that's a very important distinction, and I'm glad that you bring that up because that is a concept that it took me a while to understand as well. Like I'm 30 years old, so I'm kind of we're in the same age group now,
We're in
man.
the same ballpark. Yeah. 30 is the best decade.
You know what? I don't mind it. I love being 30. I think it's fucking
It's
great.
awesome.
It is pretty
Yeah.
awesome. And the one thing that I feel like I struggled a lot when I was in my 20s, mostly my younger 20s, but there was this sort of fear that if of giving up, or I don't know, I guess I was too obsessed with making the right choice that
Mhm.
I never really allowed myself to just understand and let go of the idea of like, you know what, it's okay to go back to the drawing board. I'm not giving up. I'm not changing anything. Let me change my approach. There's a very big difference between being comfortable with that. And that's actually something I've learned a lot through like a lot of entrepreneurs and stuff that I've met along the way and people that I've worked with, that they have this uncanny ability to just reframe. It's not even about giving up. And even still, like I've learned so much from others who've had, businesses that failed and they would just be like, oh, you know what? That didn't work. On to the next one. And then that next one would be successful. And so there is something to be learned from people like you who understand that, if you know your purpose and you know what you're going to do, you have to be kind of balanced, but also willing to change how you do things. Sometimes, in fact, I would argue the majority of times things don't work out the way you think they're going to work out. But you have to, if you allow yourself to kind of be open to letting them happen the way they're supposed to, they do tend to happen. They just happen in the weirdest ways. And as long as you stay in it and you keep on switching, it happens.
You just can't. And my dad always told me this, and yeah, it's cliche as hell, but you just don't ever give up. If you don't have if this doesn't work out, I'm just going to move home and just pivot careers. Then I hate to say it, but you don't want it badly enough. And it's all about,
and it's okay if you don't want it badly enough.
It's totally okay. And I'm well aware enough of the fact that people want different things, and that's totally fine. But when you're getting into a career, especially a career in music or a career in entertainment or a career as an actor, or whatever, you got to understand that your level of ambition has to be so high, because the sad statistic is 99.9% of people don't end up on that golden throne. They don't end up where they might want to be.
Right.
And when they start out. And again, that's okay if you can reframe it. Everything is about creating happiness for yourself every single day. If you're, like I said in the very beginning, I was happy playing my trumpet, being an actor on stage. What really just my passion was DJing and then composing. I'm just like, I would do these things without getting a paycheck every single day. In fact, I did. First 5 years in LA, 6 years, I was month to month. I was living in some not great places with roommates in a crammed in bedroom where, people would come and work on sessions. They would be sitting on my bed. I did that for 8 years, 8 years, before a few years ago, where I started making money and I could afford my own place with a studio to connect it to, you know what I mean? Right. But I always knew none of that shit deterred me from, this is what I want to be doing. And this is the path that I want to be on, and it's totally fine for other people not to identify with that, or for maybe they wanted to do it. And then they're like, I want to pivot. All these other things are important to me. People reframe. They should reframe their lives. You should never just go on autopilot. You should always be very well tapped into how the choices that you're making in day out, the relationships you're in, the things that you spend your time on are affecting you. Because the only thing that all of us want to be is happy. That's the number one underlying thing. And I know that this brings me incredible, genuine happiness. And it is exhausting. It's tiring, but I balance it. I don't have a crazy schedule. I look at this like a job. I'm plugged in the morning and I work. I play hockey. I still love hockey. I play hockey 3 days a week, and I love working out. But I love going on wine tastings, and I love having relationships with my friends and couples and going on getaways. So I'm not career obsessed in the fact that I work so hard at this that I create an imbalance. Right. Where I'm unable to have those other relationships or other experiences.
Dude, I love that
I was
you
never
said
like
that. Thank you for saying that, because that's something I try my best to say in every episode, is that balance. You need that balance.
Otherwise, you will burn out. You absolutely will. You can't be only doing one thing. It's not sustainable. What's the phrase? Everything in moderation. It's so true in so many aspects. You can't. There's this thought just to be. To be Bill Gates, you got to sleep 3 hours a night and read 10 books a day and only be hyper obsessed with that. Well, yeah, if that's your focus, but then you have to also be very well aware of the fact that there might not be a lot of room in your life for other things. Yeah. Friendships, relationships, health. Christ, there's so many other things that are important to me that I choose to make room for, and if that means I'm going to get there a little later than the kid that, spends 72 hours in a row, working on music and then just crashes and can't that might be his path, but I know that it's not mine. And
Yeah.
I'm fine with that.
Dude, I love that. I really appreciate you saying that because I don't know. I do feel like it is this, there is this aura in the air that I fell into this aura like in my younger 20s too, like that whole hustle culture and all of that. Like, and it's very, very alluring and it's a very,
It is. And don't get me wrong, I love that. That's why I love living in LA. It's palpable.
oh yeah,
You know, it's
absolutely.
feel like everybody here, I came up with all these guy friends and people that moved here at the same time that I did. We had sort of like a college 2.0, a lot of people from the Midwest, which, Midwest people are kind of their own breed. And all these people in different industries. And I had, two really good friends that were trying to be, manage like YouTube stars. And another guy was trying to do comedy and he's crushing it. And another guy was trying to be an agent. And it's like, it didn't matter that it was all different fields. There was this palpable, tangible, like drive that we all just kind of were rising. That's beautiful. That's how New York is. That's how a lot of big cities are. And I love that, but it is about balance. So for me, it's been like, you don't need to be on one opposite end of the spectrum. You can, we love to live hyperbolically. It's either like, oh, this is insane in one direction or it's insane in the other direction. Life doesn't have to be like that.
No.
You can find a middle ground, and that's the equilibrium that,
it's a great place to be in, if I can be honest.
I'm trying to always strive for. Like, do I feel fulfilled with the amount of work that I'm putting in? Because I don't really have a boss. Like, my management team keeps me really accountable, which I love. Shout out to Nate, who actually set this up. Like, weekly tasks. Like, hey, did you get me this track? Yeah. Did you get me this track? Did you get these things done that you said you're going to do? Like, we're all organized. Like, I thrive on that because I'm so type A. But at the same time, if I'm not going to be working for 2 days over the weekend because I need to unplug, then I'm going to do that.
Yeah.
It's all being in touch with yourself.
Want to hear something interesting?
Ask yourself questions.
I was just talking to, who was I talking about? Bryce. He was one of the previous guests on the show just last week, I think.
Wait, Bryce Fox?
No. I'm sorry, not Bryce. I'm sorry, Bruce. Bruce. Yeah,
Bruce.
Bruce. Yeah, Bruce is great.
Big vibe Bruce.
Yeah, I love Bruce. Okay, and I can't believe I say Bryce. Sorry about that, Bruce. So one of the things that I had struggled with my whole life is like growing up. I was always very busy. I was very much like you. I did a whole bunch of shit, and I was very good at everything that I did. But I was a huge video gamer. Like growing up, that was my escape. Like I no matter what I did, I loved playing video games, and it's a long history about it, but without getting too detailed, in my 20s I struggled so much with balancing like everybody around me because everyone was hustling 100% of the time. I sort of fell into that lifestyle. Like I'm a very fucking hard and focused worker when I need to be, but I always had this desire to like unplug and do the stuff that I really liked when I'm not doing podcasting or music, which I also really like. So I spent a good like 4 or 5 years struggling with that. And then finally my girlfriend, actually, she's the one who like out of the blue one day, she was just like, you know what? You really like video games. You shouldn't be ashamed of that. And I'm like, well, yeah, but look at all these entrepreneurs.
I love that. That is so cool.
Here's the interesting part. She was like, I really, if I were you, I would try waking up super early because you like waking up early and spending 3 to 4 hours every day just playing, just doing what you like, and then starting your day. And I'm like, no, that's fucking crazy. Everyone I know is waking up, drinking tea, working out.
Yeah.
She's like, no. She was like, you should adjust. Just try it. And I did it. I did it for a week. And oh my God, not only was I more focused, I got so much more done than I ever have done before. Like I was spending 12, 16-hour days, dude, working on shit. And I was miserable as fuck. And then all of a sudden, when I allowed myself to do what I liked, all of a sudden my brain, I don't know what it was, it freed itself up and I was able to focus way more. So what I'm getting at is
we live in a deprivation. Yeah. We live in a deprivation-based society where there's this constant pressure from social media, which isn't reality, by the way. We need to keep reminding ourselves of that you always have to be plugged in if you want to be successful, that not having balance is a good thing because, like the hustle mentality. But depriving yourself of things that you truly love is not really good for you, no matter what it is. It doesn't matter. You can't let society tell you, and this is part of like our parents' generation would say that. You mentioned video games. Like I never got into it because, and I will thank her now, Mom, thanks for not allowing video games in the house. But I didn't get it when I was growing up. Every single one of my peers, my cousins, my friends, whatever, they had them. And we weren't allowed to have them in the house because she didn't want us to become obsessed with them And it was looked at as like, oh, if you're watching TV or playing video games, you're like rotting your brain. And you're
Right.
not, that's time spent not developing or learning. But it's actually paradoxical because like in this day and age, you can make a solid living doing
Y-
both of those things without having
Exactly.
ever to put on a suit or go into an office. So it's like they were obviously trying to protect us. I'm glad I don't have that like relationship. I've never had a console. I think I liked Counter-Strike in high school, but like I
Classic
never
game.
was on talk to Bruce and he's on like a gaming team and I'm like that is so far above my head. I wouldn't even know where to begin.
Yeah, we were
You know,
talking
and
about
like
that. It's crazy.
I never had that. I never had that. It's probably good because like it isn't a vice for me and I've always been able to just like channel whatever I wanted to do into other things and that's obviously just been my journey, but you love it and you let yourself be okay with doing it every day guilt free.
Yeah. Well,
Having
it's
no
like with
guilt
you in
is the biggest
hockey.
thing.
It's like
Yeah.
with you in hockey. There are so many people that I know in the past who would look at you and be like, "Well, what are you? Are you a musician? So why are you playing a sport?"
Why
You know, it's
you're
the
not
same.
trying to be a pro hockey player. Exactly. Right. And I don't
Exactly.
ever look
Same
at it
thing.
like that. It's a form of exercise. It's a form of, I mean, before the pandemic, I was getting up twice a week to play at 6 a.m, you know, by LAX, which is 30 minutes away from me. And then I'd have to sit in traffic going back. And, you know, early in the beginning, when my girlfriend and I first started dating, she's like, why are you like getting up this early? Why are you doing this? Like, you know, and it wasn't under the guise of like, you're not going to be a pro. Why do you care? It was like, I kind of can't believe you're this dedicated to getting up and doing it. But it was never a thought for me. I love it so much unconditionally,
Yeah.
probably because my dad never forced me to play it and I didn't ever develop a resentment for the sport. You know what I mean? But
Yeah.
it's such a catharsis when I wake up and go, there's no one on the roads. I get up or I leave at 7:30 to come back to my studio. I get back here at 8:15, 8:30. I'm starting my day, and just like you said, most productive days were those days
Yeah.
pre-pandemic when I was going and playing before the sun was up, and I get done when the sun is coming up, and I have my Starbucks in the car, and I listen to my podcast, and I'm driving home. It is when I'm in the absolute best mood, and it was always on a Wednesday or a Friday, and I never had to take a nap those days because I was so energized with doing something like that, and that to me is so cool. So do you still do that? Do you still play video games
Absolutely.
too in the
It's
morning?
I do it
Yeah.
every day. So like I'm a very active person. Like I don't play hockey. I play soccer and I'm also a
Oh
trail
yeah,
runner.
love
So
that. I
yeah,
used to play soccer too.
there you
Amazing.
go.
Yeah.
And the thing is, what I've learned through experience is, and I think a lot of people are starting to learn this, like a lot of people are getting burnt out and they're allowing themselves to kind of balance their life out. What I've learned is, at least for me, and it sounds like it's the same for you, is when you have an active brain like I do, and
Hmm.
I can be very, very fucking focused, but I also can be very rebellious. If my brain feels like it's not getting everything it needs, it will rebel against me. And I've learned to kind
Wow.
of work with it. I've learned to be like, okay, you clearly need to have fun and also work hard. Because I will be upset and imbalanced if I don't do either. If I don't work at all, I will also be very upset. So, excuse me. I've kind of developed this lifestyle where I give myself everything that I need: time to play, time to work hard, time to be with friends, and everything feels really good. Obviously, there are days where you work harder than others. There are busier days than others. But the idea is the minute I allowed myself to just do what I wanted, I don't know what it was. There was like a light bulb that came up where my body was like, cool, I'm good now. I'm ready to go. You know what I mean? Like it's
Exactly.
strange. It's strange, but it
Exactly.
works. It's
No, and I think I like felt that during college, you know, building this like, well, what do I have to do, but what do I want to do? And then I look around and I never wanted to be, you know, like your life is consumed by going to a job, like things that you have to do. And then you just, and again, this is like hopefully not a large population of the public, but like people that just like work to live.
mm,
They don't live to work. You know what I mean? They just like they go to a job because they have to, and they probably don't love it. But then they look back and they're like, I just spent 30 years doing something that I just like it was an obligation. And I'm
yeah.
not saying that like you don't do that and that sacrifice is incredible because maybe you want to have a family, maybe you know you're good at it and it's just going to be money and you can separate that and that's wonderful. If that's your source of happiness and you can like live with that and you can that's your trajectory, I love it. That's incredible. But I identified early on that that would not bring me happiness. I could not just keep going through the motions of being a trumpet player, despite how good I was over the years and years and years of practice. It wouldn't fulfill me in the way that I knew I needed to be fulfilled. And when I found, being creative with composing and writing, I just ran with that. You know what I
Yeah,
mean? And I just there's an honesty about that I think is really important. And it's the same feeling that you got when you were playing video games and it kind of clicked in for you. Like, oh
it
wow,
did.
I just struck a balance, and maybe that'll change. Maybe you get to a point where I want to scale back in the video games. I want to try this thing. But that's
Exactly.
the important. It's important to always be honest with yourself and to never feel like you don't have an outlet to work on your happiness.
Yep.
That's what makes people resentful. That's what makes people lead resentful lives. Wish they should have done things. It's so important as you get older, I think, to just, like my mom, she wanted to be a naturopath, a doctor. She went back to school in her 50s and now she's a natural doctor. And
Damn.
she's in her
Holy
late,
shit.
she did it because she's like, I want to help people. She was diagnosed with MS when I was younger. And she's like, I don't want to just assume that this disease doesn't have a cure. And I'm kind of just, sitting here waiting to die, waiting to lose control of my body. She's like, so she started researching natural medicine. She's like, I want to do this for people. She doesn't have a MS anymore. It's technically an incurable disease, but she's incredibly healthy. And now she pivoted in her 50s to medicine, of which she used to be a teacher. Like she had
Yeah.
no prior. So it's insane. You can always do whatever you want. And if you want to be a musician at 30, do it. If you want to be a musician at 50 and start learning, do it. There's no the thing in front of you that you think is a roadblock is really just yourself. And
Exactly.
and if you think that, oh well, it's too late for me, or oh, I missed the boat. There's all these kids younger than me. Just fight that. You can fight through that.
I fucking
And I
love
look at
that.
all the time. Look at these kids who are in their young 20s, and I keep bringing it up, but TikTok is big right now, and I see kids getting famous and signing record deals, and I'm like, shit, it just makes me so mad because I should be there. I've done so much more work, but then I got to flip that and be like, don't focus on that. Focus on your journey. That's their
Exactly.
journey. It's just a number. Age is just a
It
thing. And
is just a
if I
number,
were to
man.
think about it, if I were to get famous in my early 20s, I'd probably be in rehab or some shit. I don't know if I were to, I'm
Yeah.
glad that I'm 32 and I've kind of figured out my life, and I figured out where my health needs to be prioritized, where my relationships, I figured out a balance that makes me feel very equipped to handle
Yeah.
anything that comes my way in the future.
Exactly. And I know that we're kind of running out of time here soon, so I'm going to
That's
let you
fine.
go
Yeah,
soon.
totally.
I'm going to tell you one more story and then we'll start
Yeah,
to wrap
please.
things up. But I was actually just on set a couple of months ago. It's interesting because you brought up acting, so which is something I don't normally talk about, but I do a little bit of it on the side too. It's
Oh,
always been like
cool.
a fun
Yeah.
passion. So I was on a
I
TV
still
show.
hope to go back to it one day. Yeah, man. I
It,
still do.
dude, it's so much fun. I'm not going to say which TV show it was. I'll tell you after the interview. But
Okay.
so I was on set and I was hanging out with the makeup artist all day long while we were, in between shots and stuff. And we just got to talking and we had a great time. And then this makeup artist told me the story of their former boss, and by the way, not to get too detailed, but being a makeup artist in the film industry, it's actually a pretty lucrative gig. You can make pretty
Sure.
decent money and it's fun and all
Sure.
that.
Yeah.
So he was
Hmm.
telling me the story of this his former boss. And in the film industry, it's very common to work 12-hour plus days. That's actually the norm. Working 16-hour days is pretty fucking normal in the film industry. And so he was telling me that when he
Yeah.
was younger, he worked for this guy who was just one of the best, and he always worked 16-hour days. He would work 80-hour weeks, and that was his life. And very quickly, the guy I was talking to got burnt out, and all his friends were kind of living that lifestyle. But he was like, fuck it, I'm just going to work 3 days a week and then spend the other time traveling and doing whatever I want. That's how he's lived his life, and he's lived a pretty happy life. Anyways, he told me the story of his boss who retired at I think 59 or 60, putting so many hours, accrued all this time, for SAG. And, he basically had all this really dope shit ready for him when he retired. But he
Hmm.
spent 30 years of his life working his ass off,
Right.
never taking time off, never starting a family, if I'm not mistaken. Anyways, once he retired, 3 weeks later, guy dies of a heart attack. And it's
God,
and
I
it's,
saw that one coming. Yeah.
yeah, and it's such an interesting story because that's not everybody's story. That doesn't always happen to everybody, and I imagine it's more rare. But it's this idea that this person was doing a pretty dope job. I imagine he loved his job. Being a makeup artist is fucking cool. But
Hmm.
he overworked himself so much to the point where he didn't really balance anything else out. And once he
Yeah.
was done with it, his life was done. Like it's such an interesting
I know.
context of
It's
like,
such a shame, right?
because you
Because
usually
you
think of those stories. You think of those stories as like someone who like worked at an office and had a horrible job, but this guy had a
yeah,
dope ass job. And
exactly.
I mean, he probably had a great life, but he didn't really spend time doing other things. And obviously, we don't know who he is, so we don't know what he wanted to do other than doing makeup. But the point is, imagine that. Imagine being
I
someone
know.
who,
Working up to retirement and then like retirement hits and it's blissful because you don't have to do anything. It's the final like sigh of relief and then you pass away 3 weeks later. Like
yeah,
that's so sad. And
it
that's
is.
even more reason what we talked about to incorporate that balance. Like the guy who was doing the makeup or whatever who just decided, listen, I'm just going to be a 3-day week and just going to accept that maybe I won't make as much money, but that's the decision I've made because I want to incorporate other things now. I
Exactly.
don't think life should be like you do something that you hate up until retirement and then you start to enjoy your life. That's you're selling yourself short. It
Yeah.
shouldn't be. And this is the shame that like, this is the American workforce in general is like what you have your 2 weeks of paid vacation a year and then the rest of the time you're in the office and you're kind of like waiting to clock out. And I'm not saying every job is like that, but there's probably a good amount that's how they're laid out. Can't wait for retirement, retire as early as I can, get a pension, then I can do the things that I want to do.
Yeah.
And like this story, this situation, you don't know when it's going to be too late. So it's even
Yeah.
more reason to try to find that happiness and try to find that balance as early on as you can, while obviously being able to provide for your family or achieve the other goals that you've set for yourself.
Yeah. Man, I love talking to you, dude. If we had more time, I would be talking to you for a couple more hours, dude, because
Yeah,
this is a lot
man.
of fun.
Absolutely. I mean, if there's ever a follow up, I don't know how you do these, but I'd love. There's definitely a lot that we didn't even really touch on, but I had it was such a pleasure,
No,
and
you're welcome to come back anytime. We need to have a follow up. So,
we
um,
definitely do. Yeah,
as we wrap things up, I want to spend like a minute or two.
yeah.
Why don't you tell me a little bit about what you got on your plate right now? Do you have any like releases? Do you have any shows? Anything in the horizon that you're working on? Anything you can share?
Well, by the time you're hearing this, I will have had a Christmas cover with Dylan Matthew come out.
Oh, that's cool.
Uh, yeah, and we are covering All I Want for Christmas, which is really sick. So hopefully by the time this airs, we did really well because we have pretty much like all of December to make it huge, and then that's it. So hopefully when you're listening to this, I am now famous because of this one Christmas cover, and you already know who my name was. But no, so really it's collaborations. I'm working on finishing collaborations with a bunch of really incredible artists. In the next, well, the goal is at the end of this year to have 5 songs finished, which they're all kind of almost there. Um, and rolling them out early next year. And then I'm going to be writing another like EP with another artist that you've heard of and that I won't mention yet, but that's going to be really exciting more for like sync and theatrical driven stuff, which is really exciting because I get to dive even more into the orchestral side of it. And then we're really, I mean, live shows are tough. Basically, we're building the visual world of what my whole experience looks like because we've touched a lot on cinema and story narrative, and like I believe a big part of my artistic movement will be the visual component
Yeah.
and sort of how that's gonna look as I continue to release music. So that's pretty much it. It's just filling up this time during the pandemic and during this interim of there's no live shows and we're kind of just building a lot of momentum so that once that happens, I will be able to transition a lot of what I'm doing into playing live shows and having people come see me live. Um, that's really the biggest thing right now is just staying on this trajectory, finishing music, and sort of building this whole thing in terms of a more eyes on me, more attention on the project.
Yeah.
So that when COVID, hopefully maybe next year, maybe the following year, I'm not sure,
Yeah.
um,
Isn't that crazy?
subsides or
So fucking
transitions in
crazy.
a way, yeah, to
Yeah.
where the visual and the live aspect, performance driven part of this can really start to come to life because that's what I'm most excited about. Really showing people when they come in and buy a ticket to see me like what this is all about. Because that's really important. You can listen to one song on Spotify, but like if you go to a show and you can kind of experience 2 hours of this, you're gonna walk away with a totally different viewpoint of like what's in my head.
I love it. I can't wait. I mean, we'll see when we can actually see it live, but it sounds pretty
Right.
cool.
Yeah.
And Danny, I just want to say thank you so much for taking time out of your day to be on the show.
Thank you, Eddie. Yeah. Thank you so much for having me on. I really appreciate, you taking an interest in my career, and hopefully all the listeners out there, learned something, enjoyed it. Yeah, really, really hope to be back soon to do a follow-up.
I hope you enjoyed that conversation. And now, as promised, here's a brand new song by Danny Olson titled Once More.